Lyne is almost 62 cycles per second. It sounds to me like it, if the frequency isn't right, it opens or closes a switch here. But it also could be vibrating back and forth. It's got a limiter on it and a spring that makes it return to one position, but it looks like some very mysterious little gadget.
Yeah, it's suspicious how similar that is to a modern-day gadget without all the bells and whistles on the front. Apparently they weren't too interested in concealing technology as much as
according to that diagram that you had on there earlier, where it showed the unipolar generator, you can see where Tesla shows in the illustration that the positive charges go one way in the magnetic field and the negative charges go around the other way. Here, okay, now you can see one set of charges goes this way and the other set goes back this way. I can't see the markings on there, but in that magnetic field, because a magnetic field will do work on moving charges. And then the current is, you see you have a loop here. Here you've got a thing on the edge to pick up current, and here you got a return loop near the center. Now, Tesla had a subdivided disk. He said if you subdivided it this way, you could energize the field, and if you subdivided it the other way, you could de-energize the field. So if you had a disk with subdivisions going this way, back that way, this way, and back the other way, then when you spun this disk between these fields, you would cause an alternating magnetic field. If you put windings on that field, you have a generator that's far beyond the current that could be generated by this disk generator.
And this could be as big as the watt meters we just showed. And that's all you need.
You get an oscillating magnetic field with windings around it, and you could get a lot more energy this way. And this is how most of his technology that got high output worked. But he described one generator that was special that we don't have anything on, the government's concealed it, that the output was phenomenal. And it sounds like the watt-hour meter from his description of it.
Wow.
From what we can get our hands on.
And just for good measure here, we have just another photograph of the same thing, basically, with the magnets and the disc, the weak magnets in the front here, and the disc going through it, and this business.
That's just to measure the disc span. But the one that I hooked up backwards, the disc would rotate fastest when the current usage was lowest. And then as the usage went up, it began to sit stationary and vibrate, and then it began to rotate the opposite direction. And so it indicated to me it's generating more power than is being used at that point when it's going backwards. When it's at stationary, the center of load, it's generating as much as you're using. And the fact is during World War II, the Germans used some of these devices which were powered by projected beam. They were robotic devices.
What kind of projected beam? Would that be microwave?
Power beam. It's a special beam that Tesla developed, and he described it. He described the device around 1915 as his dirigible torpedo, which he had tested, and he said it was capable of 300 miles a second, which is 1.5 million miles per hour.
Do you think he was exaggerating? A lot of people feel
I don't think that was, it may not have been an exaggeration. I don't know how fast this ship that I saw was capable of going, but I know that it had a way of, and from the way I understand the technology, it's totally different from this air spike thing. The way the flying saucer technology works, it's explained in the 1890s writings of Tesla and a few other major scientists in the world. The ether particles are stretched in the front with a DC brush discharge, that brings in something called the tubes of force, which are electrical force that carry momentum. And when this enters the ship and are dissolved in the ship, it imparts momentum at 90 degrees to the electric and magnetic forces.
So in respect, you can control
yes.
momentum.
Yeah, it all
or
has
you can control. Can you control inertia?
Yes.
Electrically.
Well, the way I understand it, and just from my own analysis, inertia and momentum are the same thing. Inertia is the tendency of a body to remain at rest or in its particular state of motion, whereas momentum is the same thing. Bodies in motion tend to remain in motion. However, according to Tesla and J.J. Thomson, the discoverer of the electron, momentum is the product of these tubes of force which exist in space, and they're at random until they're united by this brush discharge or by a body moving through space. Then that body accumulates a certain number of these tubes, and that imparts momentum to the body. So if you can block these ether particles from passing, you can block inertia. And that's exactly what Tesla's...
So this is actually in the literature by J.J. Thomson and Tesla.
Yes.
We're talking the 1800s.
Yes.
Getting back to saucer technology, German saucer technology, you claim in your book that you were at a salvage yard and had collected something. In fact, you have a photograph in the book. You call it a Pile-Tochter compass. Could you explain a little bit about that?
Well, literally, Pile-Tochter Kompass means polar slave compass. Tochter meaning daughter, so it's kind of a little humor in there, German humor, that the daughter is equivalent to a slave. But what that means is this is a slave compass, so there's a master compass, which is a gyro. The gyro is the master compass, and the polar slave compass will then pick up the heading that is calibrated into the master gyro, which this particular device it's mounted this way, so the dial is 360 degrees this way. It's set off in 30-degree increments, and it has a dial here, which you turn 30 degrees left, 30 degrees right. You can also do 60, 90, any 30-degree increment. But this device then has a little electric motor on it, so that when the ship changes directions, let's say that you turn the flying saucer 90 degrees to the right. Well, the main compass is calibrated to show true north. So when the ship starts moving this direction, then this little motor cuts on and rotates a dial that's with gears on it around to show you the correct flight heading according to true north on the master compass. And the reason this kind of device was necessitated in the first place was because the flying saucer has an electric field around it that makes an ordinary compass totally useless. And another reason is the flying saucer moves so fast that you're going to be over the next state in a few seconds, if you don't cut the power. And so this particular one that I have is a primitive device compared to what they must have now. But it was the only thing they could come up with to navigate these saucers. And these devices which you have here, you have a couple.
Yeah, we have here something from an American salvage yard in California. Very similar to what Mr. Lyne's talking about as far as the German version, as far as the 30-degree increments, correct? And it has a dial which adjusts here. This thing is thrashed to bits, so you'll have to excuse its shape. And we have the specifications here. Indicator gyromagnetic compass type V7A. Specification MIL 15126A. Order number AF23804. Stock number 6263-15700. Kierfot Company Incorporated, property of U.S. government. I bought it at a salvage yard, so everything's totally legal. And it's very similar to what Mr. Lyne is talking about in his book. You might want to point out the similarities or differences.
Well,
do you feel that this was from an airplane or saucer?
Yeah.
Or?
This is Air Force, USAF, type V-7A. Now, this is not the same kind of device that I have, though, but it uses some of the same technology. This is a navigator's device that will give a true reading for north, south, in different degrees, and it's graduated for any of these headings on here. The one that I have, the reason I knew what it was when I saw it was because when I was a boy, I slept in the backyard to watch these ships coming from New Mexico at night, flying in squadrons, and they would turn in 30-degree increments, 30, 60, 90, 180, and I could tell they were at very high altitude, and I hadn't seen one up close. All I could do was see them in the sky at night, high in the sky, navigating, doing maneuvers, and I would see a bunch of them flying along, and I'd see one coming along, and it looked like a star, bright light, and it would go along and then suddenly do without slowing down, it would do an instant turn, angular turn, and it was in these 30-degree increments. Well, when I saw this device on a scrap heap in Albuquerque, I knew that's what it was. And I picked it up, and certainly the label on the back, on the side of it, showed that it was a Pyle-Tochter compass, and it was labeled KT-small p large 2, KTP2, manufactured by List on October the 10th, 1943. It was a guidance compass from a German 1943 vintage flying saucer. And
now,
the device, and this was when I bought it, was in 1979. It was classified. So how did it get in this scrap heap? Soon after I got this device, the government apparently found out that I had it. So they went to the scrap dealer to find out how he got it. And the scrap dealer then said, I got it from a guy at Sandia Base. So they went, the guy at Sandia Base was the guy who normally brought scrap released for salvage to him. This guy was stealing classified, he didn't know it was classified salvage when he stole it and sold it. And so they put him under surveillance, they caught him doing it again, and they put him in jail. And then that information got back to the scrap dealer and got back to me. So that was classified information. They weren't supposed to let that kind of information get out. The scrap dealer wasn't supposed to know it. I wasn't supposed to know it, but I know it. And I found it out. So I knew that they couldn't come and get this thing back from me without confirming what it was. And why was some device from 1943 still classified if it was nothing more than an inertial guidance system?
That's a good point.
And
If it's present on every airplane in the German Air Force, and it's present in every airplane.
The dial is in the
American
middle on it, and it's clear that this device controls the direction of the flying saucer, and that the saucer can turn in any of these 30-degree increments, just like the ones that I saw.
But this one you feel is different in that this would be for an airplane?
Yeah, this would be for navigating, and what the purpose of this is you're using an inertial guidance system or navigational system to maintain a true north heading so that you know what direction you're really going.
Right.
Ordinary compass could be influenced by all sorts of things, magnetic declination, metal on the ship, electrical things can influence it, but on this device it's strictly inertial, so when they take off they calibrate the master compass. No matter which way the ship turns, it maintains its true heading in relation to this compass, and so they can always know what their heading is with accuracy for navigational purposes.
Also in this wonderful junkyard that we were in, there's another piece of salvage here called a master indicator gyro flux gate compass. Do you see any relation between these two?
Yeah, both of these more or less are the same thing. This is a World War II variety, and this is a later version, which you can see the jet plane on the pointer here, that this comes from the jet era. So as best I can tell, it may be made in the 50s, maybe 54 because of these numbers, in which case it's definitely in the jet plane era.
So it serves the same purpose.
Yeah, and it's smaller, more compact, and this is a World War II version that was used to get a correct heading with an inertial compass. And so you